The Witch Queen has released. Savathun is upon us, and as some of you, or many of you may know, I have spent a lot of time playing Destiny, and I really enjoy the game. But what if there was a way to experience Destiny in Dungeons & Dragons, combine my two favorite things pretty much ever into one clean game that I can experience with my friends? If only. Oh, yes, DnDestiny is a fan project released on the interwebs for Destiny fans and Dungeons & Dragons fans alike to experience the universe of Destiny within the game of Dungeons & Dragons. This isn't really a module, it's more like a hack. It converts D&D into a new game system, essentially. There are a lot of changes to make this combination work, and I think that this new game that they've created is really something else. I'm incredibly impressed with the DnDestiny team, and I wanted to share what they've made so far, because not only do I think that this book is incredible, it's really high quality, it's professionally done, but it's also free. So yeah, if you're interested in playing Destiny and Dungeons & Dragons, or you're just interested in a cool, unique sci-fi world to take your players through as a game master, then sit back and relax. Today, we're reviewing and talking about DnDestiny. Alright, first thing on the list, art and world building. This book looks great, and to my knowledge, most of this art is original. I haven't gone through every single piece to check, but I'm pretty sure all of it is original art made for this project, and it's all gorgeous. A lot of it evokes the feel of the Destiny universe perfectly. Destiny is a really unique world. There's a lot of incredible design and concept work that was done for the world building of Destiny, and I'm glad that the art managed to capture that. The foreign alien architecture of the robotic Vex, the design, the epic medieval gunslinger vibes that the player characters, the Guardians, give off with their armor. This book manages to capture a lot of that. Destiny's a big universe. It's very varied in its tone, in its world, in its art. I'm glad that this book managed to convey both to new and old players the sci-fi fantasy opera vibe of what Destiny gives off. The world building itself, I can't really credit it to the DnDestiny team because it was developed by Bungie. This world wasn't made by the team, but I think they did a great job of conveying the Destiny universe to a new audience. Now, of course, I think the primary audience they had in mind for this product is people who have experienced Destiny, who have played Destiny for years and want to put that world into D&D. But they didn't ignore new players. They have created plenty of lore summaries to help people understand the massive history of enemy races like the Hive, how this world came to be, what the light and darkness are, central concepts to the world that make Destiny what it is. If you want a detailed explanation of Destiny's lore for beginners, then you can check it out in the description. It's a great video. But in practical terms, you are a demigod with a gun and a penchant for shooting bad guys for loot. That's the basic summary. Now, the universe is vast, it's big, and I will admit, for a brand new player, it's a lot. It's not like Dungeons & Dragons. Your average D&D universe doesn't need to be explained much. Most of D&D is typical fantasy, and I love typical fantasy. That's why I play so much D&D. But Destiny has a lot going on in its world building. And it's not typical fantasy. There's gunslinging cowboy hunters, titans who dress up like medieval knights and wield swords along with machine guns. There are the Hive, an enemy race with literally an entire book worth of lore right here that covers an extensive galactic history. There's a lot to cover, but DnDestiny does a decent job of explaining all of that for both the game master, aka the architect, as well as players. Part of the mysticism and coolness of Destiny is how mysterious the world is. And while I do think for a lot of game masters it might be difficult to convey that mystery, that mysticism that was invoked the first time I stepped into the Destiny universe and the first time many players stepped into the Destiny universe, I think it is possible. The world building of Destiny is amazing. It's one of my favorite game universes, if not my favorite fictional universes just ever. I love the world building of the game, I love how varied it is, and I think it can work really, really well as a tabletop role-playing game if done right. Okay, I know what you're thinking. That's great, Crispy, but what about the actual game? Is this a reskin? How does this work? Now, it's definitely not a reskin. This is a hack of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. There are some elements that are retained, like Constitution, Wisdom scores. Those are all still there. You have Arcana checks, Investigation checks, that kind of thing is still there. That system remains. Those really, really fundamental elements. But literally everything else has been pretty much completely overhauled to fit into the Destiny universe. Now, I can't go over every single change because that would take a while. So, we're going to go over some core design differences, some philosophies that have changed. We're going to start with how classes work. There are 9 classes. Each of them are split into 3 superclasses or archetypes. There are 3 classes for Warlock, 3 classes for Hunter, and 3 classes for Titan. Now, these archetypes mostly serve to split what kind of items a character can use. Like, for example, the Knucklehead Radar can be used by all 3 of the Hunter classes, the Gunslinger, the Blade Dancer, and the Night Stalker. There are also archetype-wide abilities, like, for example, all of the Titan classes can use the Titan Barricade. Other than that, though, each class, all 9 of them, are pretty distinct. Even classes under the same umbrella will have notable gameplay differences, and I love that. One core design philosophy that I noticed while reading through these classes is epic. They want to make you feel epic. Destiny as a video game is a pretty big power fantasy. I mean, you are a character that can slaughter entire armies single-handedly. And while that level of power is kind of difficult to replicate in a tabletop role-playing game, they do go out of their way to make your character feel big, memorable, and yes, epic. Like, for example, you can go from summoning a gun of golden fire as a gunslinger to absolutely annihilate your enemies with the golden gun, to being a Voidwalker chucking out a Nova Bomb for apocalyptic damage against your foes. I mean, yeah, it feels awesome. Each class has 3 different abilities that they can choose from. You have your grenade, your melee, and your super. And depending on what class you're playing, you have a different variety of selections that you can pick from. These all vary up your playstyle and each have select properties unique to that particular grenade or that particular super. And I really like this. It helps to make your combat and your character a bit more dynamic. It feels like you're not really locked down to a specific thing. Even though these are the 3 abilities you can choose from, there's a pretty good selection of it. So your playstyle can vary over the course of a long campaign. This is part of the big design difference. In D&D, normal D&D, the main bread and butter of your playstyle is your abilities. Whether you have a great sword or a great axe, it's not a huge deal. But in DnDestiny, this game is based on a first-person shooter, which means, yes, your guns matter. They matter a lot. Your weaponry is a big part of what makes your character distinct. Each weapon doesn't just have a different damage dice. Auto rifles, hand cannons, sniper rifles, machine guns, they all have different properties, such as recoil, range, fire rate. That sort of thing varies depending on what weapon you use. And of course, damage dice will also change, but these various different properties make it so that the weapon that you choose to take into a particular encounter, that matters. A long-range encounter, a scout rifle is greatly incentivized over bringing in a shotgun, for example. Aside from their intrinsic traits, weapons also come with perks, just like in normal Destiny. An auto rifle with Rampage will get increased damage after a kill, or a weapon with Outlaw can get increased reload speed. Perks like that will change the way a weapon plays and incentivizes DMs to provide players with, just like in Destiny, tons of loot for them to pick through, looking for the perfect weapon to fit their playstyle. Your weapons in this game matter so much more. In normal D&D, like I said, whether you bring a great axe or a great sword into a fight, it probably isn't going to determine whether or not your character lives and dies. In DnDestiny, though, your gear is intrinsically tied to your character's fate. As a bigger part of your character, weapons take more of a center stage. There are also exotic items. Not just exotic weapons and exotic armor like in the normal Destiny, but also exotic trinkets to further vary up your playstyle. And if you think the perks on normal weapons are cool, when you get to exotic weapons, oh my god, it is a treat. Reading through the exotic section of the Architect's Guide, essentially the Dungeon Master's Guide for this game, reading through that exotic weapons section, my god, it was like Christmas. Some of those items are damn cool. They did a great job writing every single one. And there are tons of different items. And not only that, but for architects, there are just tons of different traits that you can just randomize and change around, different perks that you can put on weapons to make your own gear to give to your players. Gear is so much more important here, and I am here for it. As somebody who plays tons of MMORPGs where items are super important to characters, I love seeing items take center stage here, seeing loot be more important. Now, when players open a chest in this game, they're not just going to find like some coin that they're probably never going to use. They might find a gun that changes their character's fate, and I love that. The other big design difference is death. I was talking a lot about the fate of a character, but I might have been a little bit dramatic because in Destiny, for a Guardian, for a player character, death is just another part of who you are.
We fight, we die, and we live again.
Guardians die a lot because, remember that ghost I mentioned, the little drone that brought the Guardian back from the dead, turned them into a warrior of light? That little drone, that ghost, is your companion. They're your little buddy. Now, I love this because basically it gives every single player character an NPC for them to bounce off of in roleplay. It's a really cool roleplay opportunity for both the game master and for the players. But aside from the cool story building and roleplaying, ghosts also serve one other very important function. A, they heal you, and B, they bring you back from death itself. Not near death, not being knocked out. I mean death, like permadeath. They can bring you back from the dead. And yeah, it's about as big of a deal as you think it is. This completely shifts how the game is played. Now, when you die, your ghost can bring you back. But if your ghost dies, if your ghost, that little drone, if that thing is destroyed, well, then that is it. That's your final death. And yes, your ghost can be destroyed while you are still alive. And if your ghost is destroyed and you join them in the grave, then there's nothing to bring you back. That is how a Guardian dies permanently. That is how your story ends. So now in combat, there is whole new priorities. If somebody goes down, you need to protect the ghost. Otherwise, if that ghost is destroyed, then that's it for that Guardian. That's it for that character. That poor little drone needs to be protected at all costs. Gunfire, knives, whatever. You need to make sure that they make it out of there. Whether it's a Titan putting up their barricade to protect the ghost from oncoming fire, or it's the Warlock using an empowering rift to power up their own shots to kill any enemies in the ghost's path to reviving their fallen Guardian. You need to protect that thing, and it brings up a whole new priority in combat. I love it. This also frees up Dungeon Masters a little bit. Because death can be, not reversed, but is recoverable, you can now be very ferocious with your players. And I think that this is pretty freeing as a GM, especially since this game provides GMs with tons of monsters from the Destiny universe to use, whether it be the marauding space pirates from the Fallen or the relentless hordes of the alien hive. You can throw some crazy enemies at your players, and they will be contending with some awesome foes. Battles in DnDestiny feel a lot more big and epic than I expected, and I absolutely love it. This is not a reskin. These design differences make DnDestiny truly feel like a new game, which I was really hoping for. The Destiny universe is different from traditional D&D. It should feel different, and it does, and that's great. Alright, so let's talk about running the game, running the adventure. Now, this isn't going to be a whole guide to being an architect in DnDestiny. I haven't done it much, and most of this has just been me reading the books. I have not run a full-on campaign for this, so I'm not comfortable really giving advice fully on how to run this as a game master or an architect, as DnDestiny calls it. I don't think I can do that. However, I can say that from what I've seen, they make it as easy as they can on new architects. They do give summaries of the Destiny universe, like I said earlier. They do a good job explaining the lore so you can build a world around this. They explain the mechanics mechanics really, really well. I mean, I've only really had these PDFs for a couple days. I've only been reading them for a couple days on and off, and I understand the rules pretty well at this point. Not perfectly, but well enough that I could realistically run a game and have a good time with it. And it's only been 2 days. There are a lot of changes, and they convey them in a pretty neat manner. There are new backgrounds entirely for DnDestiny. Entire adventures have been written for this that an architect could run. Not only are they providing you with tons of items to give to your players, ideas and such, but inspiration is really important. There's tons of art to help inspire you, maps to help inspire you, big lore dumps to help inspire you if you're into that kind of thing. As an architect or game master, I would be happy to run this game. They try their best to make it easy on you, even if you're new. Now, I will admit, if you are new to this universe and you try to run it as an architect, it may be difficult. There are literally hours of lore. I don't recommend just looking at the books, the DnDestiny books for this. There's tons of supplemental material that comes from the video game Destiny to help you understand the world building. So if you are brand new, I recommend checking out that as well, because you might need it for this. But yeah, I think they do a good job making running the game something that is palpable and possible. If you're experienced with D&D 5th edition, I think that this is an easy translation. A lot of the nitty-gritty rule stuff that I needed to learn for D&D are translated into this. Like I said, the fundamentals are still there. The way rolling dice works, the way skill checks work, those are all still there. The main differences you'll need to learn is how the ghost's resurrection works, how healing works in this game is also different. The way the weapons work is really, really important. The main differences are in combat, so that's where a lot of my focus was. If you are somebody who's going to run this, make sure to read those sections. That is very, very important to understanding how this game works. Out of combat stuff, a lot of the mechanics stay the same. It's still a lot like D&D 5th edition, even if the universe is completely different and the rules change and the classes change, those things stay the same. But yeah, overall, I like the Architect's Guide. As for the monster manual of this universe, it provides you with tons and tons of monsters, as well as the weapons that they drop, so your players can use those too. Like I said, gear is a big deal here, and your players are going to be picking off guns from their enemies' cold, dead corpses to use against them as well. Rest assured, I'm sure that's going to happen, and DnDestiny makes that possible. But yeah, gear aside, what about the actual monsters? The monster manual provides you with tons of monsters, both from Destiny and original creations from the development team of this game, and I really like it. They don't stray too far from the Destiny universe when it comes to the monsters. They do stray pretty far from Destiny universe when it comes to the player characters, but again, you know, it's an imagination game. It's a TTRPG. These things are going to happen, and I think that's okay. But yeah, the monster manual stays pretty close to the way Destiny works and the monsters that are established in the Destiny universe. You have a variety of different enemy races to pick from, each one with different enemy units. The Fallen have their Vandals, their Dregs, their Captains, whereas the Taken have their various corrupted enemy races in their ranks. Each race does a good job of making themselves feel pretty unique, and each unit complements each other very, very well. They each have a style. Hive are pretty good at rushing opponents with their sheer numbers. Fallen have a lot of gear that they can use to overwhelm their enemies. The different enemy races do feel distinct in a lot of different ways, and I like that. It's just like normal Destiny. There are a variety of high challenge rating bosses that come from Destiny the game. I think that some of them are a bit too high for starter players. You're not going to be fighting Crota the Light Eater at first level, clearly. But I also think that it provides DMs or GMs or architects or whatever you want to call them with enough information that they can realistically also create their own monsters. That's a big thing that I want from future editions of the Monster Manual. Resources to create your own stuff. And while DnDestiny's Monster Manual doesn't necessarily do that, it provides you with enough information that you can realistically homebrew and change up the monsters that you have to do your own stuff with them. And I do like that. It doesn't feel so restrictive and confusing that I feel like I wouldn't be able to tackle creating my own Fallen units or modifying higher tier bosses for lower tier characters. I will admit, when looking at the Architect's Guide, it's easy for me to feel a bit overwhelmed at times, but after going over a few of the rules a few times, going over the Monster Manual, it really reaffirmed what I said earlier. They're trying their best to make it as easy as they can. There's a lot of rule changes to make this universe work in D&D, but I think they pulled pulled it off. And not only did they pull it off, they did a good job explaining it. And I think that that is so important and something that I'm really happy to see. Alright, final verdict. And no matter what criticisms I had of this, I need to say one thing. This was made for free. There is no purchasing at all here. This book was made simply for passion, for both Dungeons and Dragons and for Destiny. Made by people who clearly have passion and love for these games, for this universe, and I love that. I mean, I can't get over the fact that all of this art is custom done for this game. That's crazy to me. This was done without any want of profit. It was just done for the people who love Dungeons & Dragons, who love Destiny, made by people who clearly care, and it's great. And not only is it a respectable work of passion, but it's also, in my opinion, a pretty well-designed game. Are there times where flaws are going to show? Maybe, probably, in fact. It might happen. I haven't playtested it extensively enough to see that, but at the same time, the fact that they managed to translate such a different game into Dungeons and Dragons is so impressive to me. I mean, there are fundamental differences in the design philosophies of Destiny when compared to D&D, and they manage to make it work, and I cannot get over how impressive that is. This game is really well done. I am extremely happy with how DnDestiny came out, even after all these years. They did a great job with the core rulebook, with the monster manual, with the architect's guide. They did a great job. Well done to the team. If you're interested, you can find it all in the description down below for 100% free. Please show these guys some love. They absolutely deserve it. And bravo to these brave guardians for taking on this challenge and succeeding with, in my opinion, flying colors. If you guys enjoyed this episode of One Crispy Review, then please do leave a like. I might do this series more often than once every blue moon. I really enjoy making these reviews, and if you guys continue to watch them, then I'll continue to make them. If you want to see more of my content, we have an over 120 episode RPG horror story series where I go over the best of the worst of Dungeons & Dragons. You can check it out in the cards, and while you're there, subscribe to Crispy's Tavern to get more of our content when it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own reviews or thoughts, go down into the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment Eyes Up Guardian to let me know you made it to the end of the video. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you all next time. Farewell.